So whether it is you're a medical student, a nursing student, a medical practitioner, or you are a person who is interested in understanding the human body, you're welcome. I'm going to give you some scenarios that is going to help you see the importance of today's lecture, as we are going to be talking about the cardiovascular system. Suppose you're on your way out and you observed an accident that happened, and one or some of the individuals involved in that accident becomes unconscious and they are laying on the ground. You look closely and you see that this person may not be breathing. What do you do? Are you aware that the understanding of the cardiovascular system, or your understanding of the cardiovascular system, could be the difference between that person living long and that person dying at that very point? Or let's say you are a medical student, a nursing student, or a practitioner, a health practitioner in the health environment, or let's say health sector, and your patient or client begins to complain of chest pain, shortness of breath, and you notice that their oxygen saturation is around, let's say, 78% oxygen saturation. Are you equally aware that if you do not understand the anatomical positions and the physiological structures and functions of the heart or the cardiovascular system as a whole, that patient could be misdiagnosed and probably complications could occur, even death? And so in today's lecture, we are going to be talking about the structures of the cardiovascular system. And so I want you to pay attention. Take out your pen, your book, whatever you're using, or, just make sure you're not distracted during this class. So first of all, there are certain structures that make up the cardiovascular system, and the most significant of them all is the heart. So the heart is a hollow organ. By hollow, it means that there is a space inside of the heart, which is located in the medial sternum, the middle of your chest, the sternum, this bone up here, the medial sternum, but it is slightly tilted or facing more of your left hand side. Now, in the cardiovascular system, it is a system that is responsible for circulating blood around your body. Now, not just blood, that blood is responsible too for carrying around oxygen and nutrients whenever you eat food that digest. Those nutrients move or are easily transported as a result of the blood that your heart and vessels, such as the veins, the arteries, or the capillaries, move around. Now, what about the carbon dioxide whenever you breathe? This same structure, the heart, and equally other blood vessels are responsible for moving it out. So, in that case, let us look at, first of all, how blood is transported between the heart and other parts of the body for oxygenation, deoxygenation. Now, let's go right into this. Now, first of all, whenever you breathe in, it is assumed that that blood has the oxygen you take in has been diffused towards different cells and organs around your body. But then, for you to breathe out those used up oxygen that has been converted to carbon dioxide, the blood has to go into the heart. Now, that blood that goes into the heart goes in through a major and a large blood vessel called the vena cava. Now, this vena cava is responsible for bringing in deoxygenated blood. Deoxygenated blood is a blood that has its oxygen used up by the cells around the body. Now, let's say for the top part of the body, blood comes in, deoxygenated blood comes in through what we call the superior meaning on top or above, superior vena cava. Now, for the lower extremities or the lower part of the body, blood or deoxygenated blood comes in through the inferior meaning lesser or lower, inferior vena cava. Now, blood is coming in. Now, when blood comes in through these great vessels, please take note, the vena cava is the biggest vein in the human body. Now, when blood comes in through the vena cava of the that is connected to the heart, it goes into a chamber that is responsible for collecting the deoxygenated blood. Now, that chamber is known as your right atrium. The right atrium. The chambers of the heart responsible for receiving blood are called the atrium. Please take notes. Or for one, atria. Now, when blood collects into the right atrium, it receives it and delivers it to another structure that is responsible for moving that blood out, or will I say pumping that blood out, which is the right ventricle. Ventricles. Now, the heart ventricles are chambers that are responsible for receiving and pumping out blood out of the heart. Now, when this blood, the oxygenated blood, gets into the right ventricles, it has to go out. Now, for it to go out, it has to go out through another great vessel. Now, the name of this vessel is the pulmonary artery. The pulmonary artery. Pulmonary artery. Now, pulmonary artery, as pulmonary represents, what pulmonary is lungs. Now, pulmonary arteries take this blood that is already deoxygenated, it takes it back to the lungs. It takes this deoxygenated blood back to the lungs. Now, do you know why? So that that blood would carry out that carbon dioxide, take it out of the lungs, take it to the lungs for expiration. But then that same blood that is passing by will now take in the oxygen that the lungs provide. It takes in that oxygen and returns it back to the heart. Now we can call that blood which has received oxygen oxygenated blood. Now we are going to be representing the oxygenated blood with this red marker. It goes in to the heart through vessels called the pulmonary veins. The four pulmonary veins. Now, this is worthy of note. The pulmonary veins are the only veins in the human body that carries oxygenated blood. They are the only veins that carry oxygenated blood. Now, whenever it is that the blood has become oxygenated, or will I say the blood has become oxyhemoglobin, or oxyhemoglobin, oxyhemoglobin, this blood becomes bright red. I want you to take note, oxygenated blood is bright red. Why the oxygenated blood is dark red? The reason for this is because of the reaction between oxygen and iron in the hemoglobin. That is the reason why the blood is bright red. But whenever oxygen has been used up, it becomes a darker shade of red. And that is why the color of the oxygenated blood is darker. Now let's go back. Now, the heart has received the oxygenated blood, which we represented as the blue circulation. But then it has become oxygenated. And then the oxygenated blood returns into the heart through four vessels called the pulmonary veins. Now, whenever it is that blood enters through the heart through the pulmonary veins, it goes into another receiving chamber. Now, do you remember what we call chambers of the heart that receive blood? The atriums or the atria. Now, it goes in, oxygenated blood goes into the heart through the left atrium. Now, this chamber is located on the left hand side of the heart or the left side of your body. Let's look at it that way, the anatomical position, the left side of your heart. Now, when oxygenated blood goes into the left atrium, it sends that blood into another structure responsible for pumping out blood. We call this the left ventricle. Left ventricle. Now, if you look at the structure of this heart, you will notice that the atrium has smaller muscles around it. Did you notice? It has smaller muscles around it. Now, the muscles of the right ventricle is a little bit smaller compared to the muscles of the left ventricle. The reason for this is because the right ventricle, as you can see, is only supplying, pumping out blood to an organ that is close to the heart, the lungs. And that is the reason why it has little. It has a smaller amount of muscle compared to the left ventricle. Now, this left ventricle is literally responsible for pumping out blood, circulating blood around your body. So whenever you're giving somebody CPR, you are forcing the heart to pump out blood from this left ventricle around the body, especially to the brain, so that the person can remain conscious. And that explains why this left ventricle has more muscles. Now, when the oxygenated blood goes in to the left ventricle, it goes into another blood vessel. And that is where we get the biggest arteries in the body. The aorta. The aorta. The aorta is the biggest artery in the human body. The aorta is literally responsible for receiving oxygenated blood and circulating it from the heart around the body. So that oxygenated blood goes into the aorta and is distributed to different parts of the body through arteries, and the smallest arteries we call the arterioles. So as we're saying, so now we've come to understand that the circulatory system, as the word implies, it's like a circle. The blood in the body moving round from a particular starting point back to that same starting point. We call the starting point the heart, and it still ends up back in the heart. So the mechanism of the heart or the circulatory system is very wonderful. Now let's go over it again. Whenever your heart, your body, has used up oxygen, the oxygenated blood comes into the heart through the vena cava, the superior and the inferior vena cava. Now the vena cava sends the blood, the deoxygenated blood, into the right atrium. Now from the right atrium, when it receives that deoxygenated blood, it takes it into the lower chamber responsible for pumping out blood to the lungs. And that chamber is known as the right ventricle. Now this right ventricle, once it sends blood out, it sends it through the pulmonary arteries. The pulmonary arteries are responsible for taking deoxygenated blood to the lungs. Now when deoxygenated blood gets to the lungs, it releases or excretes CO2, carbon dioxide, and receives oxygen, O2. Now this blood receiving oxygen becomes oxygenated. Now when the oxygenated blood, or like we call it, the blood is now has oxyhemoglobin, bright red color. When this oxygenated blood goes into the heart, it goes into the heart through 4 vessels. Now the 4 vessels are called the pulmonary veins. Now, these pulmonary veins take the blood that is oxygenated into the left atrium, which receives. Now, remember, the chambers of the heart responsible for receiving blood are called the atrium. The chambers of the heart responsible for pumping blood are called the ventricles. The atrium are located on the top right and left position of the heart, while the ventricles are located at the bottom right and left position. So, oxygenated blood goes into the left atrium, sends it to the left ventricle, which has more muscles because it is responsible for moving the pressure around the body, has to be overcome by the left ventricle. So it has more muscles. So this left ventricle forces, with enormous force, it forces the blood out through the aorta. The aorta is the biggest artery in the human body. It forces through the aorta for systemic circulation. Now, systemic circulation is blood going around the body. Pulmonary circulation is blood going to the lungs and back into the heart. You get? Good.